this video I'm going to be discussing my experiences of the last few years keeping emerald tree boas by incorporating natural weather into their husbandry, some of which has been done in outdoor setups, a lot of which has been done in indoor setups. But I'm going to be talking about my experiences with that and just showing some footage and discussing some of that stuff in detail here. So currently on screen you're seeing one of the most beautiful northern emerald tree boas I was ever lucky enough to see in person, and actually owned her for a few years. This snake's name was Mayamara. She was a very old northern, originally a wild caught, and this snake not only helped push me into getting further falling in love with emerald tree boas and wanting to work these projects, but also was one of the early inspirations for me to start experimenting with keeping them in outdoor setups, partial outdoor setups, and basically utilizing the sun and natural warmth in their care. So her previous owner actually kept her for almost close to 16 years, just on his back porch here in Florida in a big custom screen cage that he had built for her when he got her. And so he kept this snake in this big outdoor enclosure, like I said, just on his back porch, completely ambient heat. He did not set her up to get a basking spot or anything like that. He did not use any kind of external heaters. He also did not ever spray this snake. You could see from the cage design, it was about 6 foot tall, if I remember correctly, and about 3 foot wide, about 2 foot deep, something right around there. And he just had the single large water bowl on the very bottom of the floor, and the snake, had to crawl down and drink from the water bowl, for its hydration. And she lived a long, good life with him in those conditions. He told me that he had only, he would just bring her inside when it got a little too cold out there. Basically, if it went below the 60s, he would wheel the cage inside. But any other time of the year, he always left her out on the back porch like that. She seemed to really thrive that way. She was an old snake. I would estimate she was probably somewhere in the area of 25 years old, maybe even older. It's really hard to gauge, but he said she was an adult when he got her, and he had her for close to 16 years. So anyways, so that early look at what this guy had been doing with this snake, really unintentionally. He wasn't trying to do anything special or specific. He wasn't even really a big he didn't keep a ton of snakes or anything. He just had a few pets. He had some boas that he also kept in an outdoor enclosure on his back porch. He had Mayamara, and I think he had previously one or two things. When I got the snake from him, he was moving out of state, so he was getting rid of his snakes before he left. But he was just doing what he thought seemed sensible at the time, which turned out to be really quite smart, and just letting the snake enjoy the natural ambient temperatures and humidity here in Florida. And she did really good. He fed her fairly sparingly. I think he fed her about once a month, once every 6 weeks, something like that. And she did great for a long time. And I was lucky enough to have her for just a couple of years before, unfortunately, she did have liver cancer and eventually passed away. But anyways, it was that early experience with her, talking with the guy who had kept her, seeing the way he was keeping her, thinking about that, as well as looking at the some of the inspirational videos from guys like Australian chondro breeder Michael Cermak, who had a really amazing outdoor setup for his green tree pythons in Australia. And seeing those videos early on in my working with emeralds and green trees again, definitely got me inspired to start thinking more along those lines and trying to think ahead and plan for a future where I would probably keep them, in large outdoor cages like this as well. But in the meantime, what I started doing was experimenting with, quarantine setups, partially out of necessity, because I'd run out of space to try to do, quarantine indoors. I had to pass on a group of anaconda phase emeralds that I wanted really badly, but I just did not have the space to properly quarantine them at the time, so I had to pass on them. And it made me really start thinking, well, I need to figure out a better solution for quarantine here, and ideally, considering the risks with wild-caught emeralds, it'd be even better to just quarantine in a separate area altogether from the house. So that's what I started doing. I started utilizing an outdoor building and keeping the snakes in tubs, but using, no external heat, no external lights, nothing, just completely naturally heated from the ambient warmth from the sun, just the natural weather. And so I started quarantining them in tubs, really highly ventilated tubs, with a ton of holes melted in the sides and tops. And I actually even quarantined one of them on my carport as well to see how that would pan out. And I was initially nervous about doing so because obviously the temperatures are going to get pretty high in Florida, and so I was concerned that might be a problem. But what I quickly found was that these snakes were thriving in the natural ambient warmth and that high humidity. And so as I started doing that, initially doing it just for the quarantine purpose, I started realizing this is actually how I'd like to keep them. They're doing so well this way that I would like to keep all of them in a similar manner. And so after doing some of those initial early quarantine setups, I started trying to figure out, well, how can I kind of do something a little bit along the lines of that indoors? Until I have a proper building and the kind of land and space to be able to do my original plan of large outdoor cages. In the meantime, I wanted to start trying to figure out ways to do this. And so this is what led me to eventually start keeping more and more of them, just using ambient only for their warmth, and eventually started utilizing the sun coming in through the window in a couple different areas of the house, but one main one in particular, and utilizing the sun coming in through the window both as their ambient warmth and also to actually create basking spots eventually for the breeding females. And so that's essentially what I've transitioned to nowadays, is focusing primarily on the ambient warmth as the primary, while constantly fluctuating natural ambient warmth as the only source of heat for them wherever possible. I can't get away with that in every single area that I keep them, but in the main areas I do. And utilizing that natural sunspot that comes in through the windows for the females for basking, and being able to watch their behaviors and see what they're doing utilizing that sun has been pretty interesting, because I think it's got some parallel with what I imagine is going on in nature for them. I doubt it's an exact replica, but I think it's got some parallels there that are definitely pretty interesting to see, including seeing them doing things like partial and cryptic basking. So I guess I'll start showing some of that and talking about that now, what I'm doing in the currently in the back areas, and just be showing a bunch of different random clips, and hopefully this is all somewhat useful information for people, and that it's enjoyable. Okay, apologies for the lighting not being that great back here, but just wanted to show you, this is the setup I've got for this back room for the emeralds. So I've got a few back here at the moment. This is White Rose. She just ovulated a few days ago. She's sitting pretty, really nice high white northern. And she utilizes already, ever since she ovulated, she's already starting to utilize that sunlight that comes in to that side of the enclosure, so she can get more shaded over there if she wants. And in the morning she follows that pattern that they've all done after they've ovulated. The females will pretty much always, in the morning as the sun starts coming up, they'll move into a position to bask. So far she likes to bask, right sprawled out, either down here or up there, a little higher on the perch. But she'll sprawl out, bask for anywhere from anywhere from an hour to a few hours, depending on the heat of the day and how hot the basking temperature gets, and then shift over to the cooler side of the cage and then just sit in the ambient warmth. So to give you an explanation, this room basically is a back kind of storage area room, but it has a lot of sun that comes in through these windows. We do have little bit of shade to dampen them, but the sun is what warms this room. And there's no external heaters that I use on the cage. There's no external lighting that I use for the cages. We do grow some plants, so there's some grow lights there, but those don't really have any impact on the snakes. So the sunlight comes through basically every day, warms up the room, and whatever the ambient temperature is whatever the snakes get, and that fluctuates all day, every day throughout the year. There's no stagnant temperatures. Nothing is consistent in that way. It just always fluctuates with what's going on outside. So right now it is only 82. You can see it was already up to 86, I think, yesterday. And this female Amarella actually gave birth here back in October in this exact setup, in this exact spot. And she did her entire gestation period with no external heaters, no nothing, just all from the sun. As did this female in this exact spot. This is a female from my friend Jason, and she's putting weight back on, as is Amarella. So both of these females had their litters back here last year, and then I had another litter the year before that with a female anaconda phase named Mamaconda. So this is my third season now in a row doing this. So the idea behind the room was basically to get something close to like what's going on, utilizing the outdoors that I was already doing with my quarantine setups, but in a little bit more of a controlled manner, and obviously without being actually outdoors. But because of the way this room functions, even though there is AC that makes it into here, it's really barely anything. It just helps tame down the temperature slightly. So it still fluctuates all over just like it does outside. And basically whatever the temperature is, whatever the ambient temperature is outdoors, it's essentially 2 to 3 degrees lower than that in here. So the hottest parts of the year, the ambient temp will get up to 90, 91, maybe even 92 in this room, up to several hours in a row, but never any major sustained temperatures. It's always fluctuating, and it's not every day. Every day is different, like I said, so it's constantly changing. And then at night it generally drops down into the high 70s most of the year. On the coldest months of the year, it will drop down as low as 68, 67, 68 degrees back here. But for the most part, it's more like 72, 73 at night. And then there are sometimes, weeks in a row during the winter where, the ambient temperature in here doesn't go above 79 or 80. That's peak, And these animals do fine at those temperatures. They don't develop respiratory illnesses. They really seem to thrive back here. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I always make sure that their humidity is correct. So they always have nice high humidity. Even though I don't spray them, I use water bowls, and then the ventilation is tuned according to each cage to get them in that 70, 65, 75, 80% range humidity. And it works out really well for them. So let's see. So basically what these females do back here, once they ovulate, they start that cycle, that pattern of, every single day basking. As the sunlight comes in through the window, they'll bask for up to a few hours and charge up, and then they'll move off of the basking area that the sunlight creates, and then they will, just sit comfortably. And it's been pretty amazing to watch, because now it's, I'm already seeing the exact same pattern with White Rose here, that she's following the same pattern that I've seen with the other females back here, so it seems to be really consistent. And I think it's pretty similar to what they would be doing in the wild or in an outdoor setup. It makes sense. They'll utilize that sunlight, get nice and charged up, and then move off of it, and that's that. And part of that pattern that's been interesting to watch is definitely as they get closer to delivery of the babies, they don't bask for as long periods of time. And I'm assuming, that's for the protection of the babies. They don't want to overheat, don't want to cook them. And they get to the point where they really will barely bask much at all as they're really getting close. So that's something to take into mind. Some of these ideas, I know a lot of this stuff can't really be done in any old climate. So, not all of this stuff is going to be applicable to what you're doing with your own snakes, but just some ideas to take into consideration in terms of things like basking. You know, do they really need a 12-hour basking spot every single day, all day for the entire gestation period, especially if they can't really get away from it properly? You know, do they need a single temperature that has to be maintained 100% of the time, and, you know, with no fluctuations, all these kind of things? I'm certainly leaning you know, more and more away from that as I've been experimenting the last few years. But just something to take into consideration, you know, with your own setups, and, you know, if any of this stuff might apply to what you're doing. So I plan to continue breeding them like this for the foreseeable future, and depending on what we do when we buy a house, I'm not really 100% sure yet. My original plan was to actually keep, you know, basically have a bunch of emeralds and chondros in big outdoor cages when we buy a place, but unfortunately I made the mistake of sharing way too much information about what my plans were with somebody last year, and a few weeks later I had to get the nice surprise of seeing that somebody else is implementing nearly every single thing I had planned to do. Got a buyer to buy a ton of snakes, and, well, you know, it is what it is. So it's definitely made me rethink a little bit on what I'm going to do. That, and then also the situation with FWC is a little confusing on whether I think it's a good idea for me to do full outdoor caging moving forward, because they had mentioned in their species evaluation form a year or so ago that they wanted to start looking at, you know, when evaluating species for potential invasive status, that they wanted to start looking at outdoor collections, you know, animal, like species that are kept in outdoor setups, as you know, to help determine whether they would thrive here or not and become invasive. So it's definitely made me reconsider what I'm doing going forward there, but we'll see. So in the meantime, yeah, this is what I'm doing, and I plan to keep doing that, and hopefully some of this stuff is useful. Might be something to consider for your own setups, incorporating some of these kind of ideas. And I'm just kind of babbling and panning around at this point. It's a little awkward the way I'm filming this, so hopefully this doesn't come out looking like total shit. Alright. Okay, so this is another room that I have some emeralds in with some of these acrylic cages. So right now I've just got the two occupied right there. There's two more there, but they don't, the bottom right one doesn't have anything in it yet. The bottom left does have Larry, but this repeat pairing is Mamaconda, this anaconda face female right here, and Larry is a normal male from Suriname. And those two produced an awesome litter for me in 2022, and they've been breeding again, so hopefully good things to come from that. And then this is one of my actually my first wild-caught emerald that I got, my girl Artemis, sitting back there looking good. And I've switched things up around here to where now they actually get some back heat from that window, so it'll be interesting to see how these things do. I'm still probably going to end up, I think I'm going to end up moving this cage into the other room just to be on the safe side, since I've had such good results back there, that I kind of want her to, you know, if she's going to get gravid, I want all that to happen back there. I think, anyways. I might change my mind and just let her do it back here and hope for the best with the sun coming in through the back, but we'll see. And so in this room, we also have some more plants that she has set up growing, so that helps with humidity and everything here. But yeah, so that's the basic stuff going on as far as that goes, and there's emeralds all over the place, but these are the two main back rooms for the adults. So here's another area that I have a couple tubs with some juveniles, wild caught one here. And so this is a really nice dark, interesting dark female Suriname. Just keeps getting darker and darker. I don't know what she's gonna do, but she's just all ambient as well, and kept over water still, even at over 2 years old. and this has worked out really well. And overall, the snake actually has probably had some of the coolest temperatures, and yet still does fine because the humidity is correct. So this one's more often than not been low 80s, you know, sometimes up to the mid 80s, but I've been kind of seeing how they would do at lower temperatures as well, and they do really well. They're pretty bulletproof when the humidity's right. So just another look at what's been going on. And there is some sun, a little bit of sun, because there's a window nearby here that gives a little bit of extra warmth to the area, but it's primarily just ambient. Okay, well, that brings this to the end of the video. Hopefully some of this information was useful and gives you an idea of what I've been up to the last few years with this species. And yeah, hope this was an enjoyable watch.